What's better than watching your team win? Winning money while you do it. I'm Jim Costa, and on Cash the Ticket, Mike Valeni and I give you the edge to make every game playable. College football, NFL, we're breaking it all down game by game. Your podcast feed is going to be filled, and you're going to love it. You can click on the games you care about. We do it all. With our analysis, we're finding games that other people aren't talking about. We're turning every Saturday and every Sunday into days where you got a chance to win. Don't just sit on the sidelines. Cash the Ticket with us. Follow Cash the Ticket in the free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.
It's time to get in the zone. Time to get in the zone with the 49ers web zone. This is the No Huddle Podcast with Al and Brian.
49ers Web Zone No Huddle Podcast. We're part of the Odyssey Network. Al Sacco, Brian Renick. Hope everybody had a very Merry Christmas. I have been on my deathbed sick for about a week, so wasn't the best for me. We made the best of it. Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. It's never bad, but I've been struggling. I'm finally back. I finally feel human. It's good to be back. It's good to be talking football with Brian and with you guys. Update on my fantasy team, because I know everybody was wondering. Brian, I was getting my ass kicked.
Yeah.
I mean, my ass handed to me. And I'm like, all right, well, I had a good run. And I can still play for third place, get some money. But then a Christmas miracle happened. I needed like 100 points in the afternoon games to even have a chance, right? I got 100 points. I think I could pull this out. And that's a lot. I had 5 guys going. 100 points is talking 20 points a guy. It's a lot. And then Justin Jefferson, 36.4.
Yeah.
James Cook, 30.6. James Conner, 27.60. Oh, he was in the morning. He was in the morning games. Jason Sanders, 21. DK Metcalf, 14.7. Moral of the story is I got the Christmas miracle, pulled it out by like 40 points, and here I am in the championship game. And I'll certainly update everybody next week because I know everybody can't wait. But that was
nice.
The highlight of my Sunday. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't swallow. But son of a bitch, did I win that fantasy game.
You guys did it for you.
About it.
They won one for the Gipper while he was on his
Gipper,
deathbed.
My boys, on my deathbed, and here I am. So I hope you had a Merry Christmas. I hope everybody else did too. And now we're back to talking Niners. Great.
Yes.
Yay.
Well, before we talk about the Niners, I will say I as well am in the championship. Last week was the first week of a 2-week matchup. And so both of us are vying for a championship. After last week, I was up. What was it? It was by 15 points. And then he had Lamar Jackson on Christmas Day. So he got 29.4, and I had Pat Freiermuth. I got 7.5. So right now he's up 175 to 166. But the prediction right now is for him 286.79 and for me 286.28. So it is going to be a barn burner. Hoping my guys pull it out. Hey, dual championships from the No Huddle podcast at least might help our fans since the 49ers aren't bringing one home this year.
I'm sure that's really going to get everybody through the season. They're
Absolutely.
Really
You're welcome. You're welcome.
You're welcome, faithful. You're welcome. All right. While I was dying, I'm always thinking Niners. One of the topics I thought that would be good for the show is, we're getting to the point of the season where what is there to talk about? I mean,
right.
The team has been uninspired. It's, at some point you're just kind of belaboring the same points over and over again. But did bad business sink the 49ers, not only this year, but next year and moving forward too? And I'll explain what I mean. So the 49ers doubled down and shelled out a lot of money this offseason to run it back with players that are getting older, with players that maybe they paid more than they wanted to. The 3 big guys there who already had contracts. And, we'll talk about it because I didn't like the way all of it really shaped out, even just with the way that the players approached it. But the overview of it is Trent Williams, Brandon Ayuk, and Christian McCaffrey. All of them had contracts. The Niners shelled out a lot of money to keep them happy. And ultimately, Brian, they got 21 games from those 3 players this year. CMC and Ayuk, they combined for 722 total yards and 0 touchdowns in 11 games.
Brutal.
And if you told us that before the season, you'd say, oh, shit, well, the season maybe didn't go that well. It certainly didn't. We're headed toward 10 losses, which is still, I still can't fathom it, but it's where we are. And maybe it just started, when everybody was talking about the bad vibes preseason, maybe that's when it started, and maybe it did push over, and maybe these 3 contracts really had an overarching effect on this whole team.
Yeah, I it's hard to say because all 3 of those guys are beloved in the locker room. So I don't think any player was begrudging them, getting what they needed or what they felt they needed. Obviously Trent Williams is the one who was arguably least set up to hold out for a different contract, just because he signed a massive contract 3 seasons ago, still was in line to make a good amount of money, but also an older player who needed more guaranteed money to feel comfortable going out there. Like, again, I don't begrudge that. I understand that. Christian McCaffrey, that was the quietest one. Like, that wasn't one that they just went about their business and did it. And then obviously the Brandon Ayuk situation. Vibes felt off. I agree with you. I just don't know that they were in a position to not do what they did. And to me, it's not necessarily, it's bad money chasing bad decisions, right? Where, you are in a position to have to sign Trent Williams because you don't have anybody to, as an heir apparent to take over on that side. You have to sign Brandon Ayuk because you haven't drafted well in that, at that position, that you have somebody, coming up ready to take over for him because he got too expensive. Right. And with Christian McCaffrey, I think you just, to me, that is a signing to appease Kyle Shanahan. So, I mean, outside
was that
of
bad business?
I mean, yes, because I feel like I don't know. It's just I didn't think the signing was bad, and I'm not gonna go back and do some revisionist history just because he ended up with that injury, because that's the thing is there were no indications of that injury last year. So it's like, you go by what all the information that you have. So you cannot, I cannot go back and second guess that. I thought it was smart when it happened, and I'll stick by that. But there are people that would say bad business is paying aging running backs. So in that regard, for sure, it is, by industry standards, you could argue bad business.
And I think that's the way that you have to look at this. So I'm playing devil's advocate here with a lot of it. Because again, you're going to say, well, we want to bring Trent Williams back. We want to make sure he's happy. Nobody at the time was saying like, oh, get rid of that guy. Right. Same thing with McCaffrey, even though, well, we did say on the show with running backs and McCaffrey, for an example, the last 400 touch season he played 10 games the next 2 years. Yeah. 2019 with the Panthers, he played 10 games in 2020 and 2021. He had another 400 touch season. We did say that was a risk, and it is for running backs. Right. I'm typically on team don't pay running backs, not at that age anyway. But hindsight's 2020 looking at this stuff. So we're not sitting here saying like, well, we didn't think so. We're just, what happened? Did it end up being bad business? And what have we learned from it? And look, the Chiefs can tear up Patrick Mahomes' contract tomorrow and give him a 5-year, whatever, $350 million contract, right? And nobody would bat an eyelash. Right. But if he plays like Drew Lock for the next 5 years, you're going to come and say, you know what? Yeah. That was a bad contract. That wasn't a good contract. You have to judge it on the performance. So even if you were, maybe some fans weren't on board, whether you were, whether you weren't, you have to judge it by what's happened. And right now, all 3 look like disasters. We'll start with McCaffrey, like you said. He was coming off an offensive player of the year. He wanted guaranteed money. We had talked about, all right, you guarantee him this year. Maybe you guarantee him next year, you put some dummy years on or whatever. Well, now you're in a situation where you may never get the real Christian McCaffrey back. It may not happen. I know he looked better in that Bills game, but he didn't look like himself. He got hurt again. You just don't know. He's going to be a 29-year-old running back. Trent Williams, I don't like the way that stuff was handled by Williams or Ayuk. And when you go that far into camp and into preseason, and then you're right before the season when you get this stuff done, there's some kind of disconnect between you and the player. And if the Niners were just a wink and a nod, we're like, you're Trent Williams, don't need to be here. Well, he apparently did. And the same thing with Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa apparently did. So that stuff doesn't work, and that stuff's got to stop with the Niners too. And then you get into Brandon Ayuk. Excuse me, I may be coughing a little bit through this. Brandon Ayuk just handled the whole thing like a clown. He did. He did. He acted like a diva. And then the Niners gave him what it looked like more money than they wanted to. He does nothing in the 7 games he played. He didn't score a touchdown. Now, they do miss him being able to stretch the field, but statistically, he did not have a good year. And now you may not even see him until mid next season, late next season.
Right.
So regardless of what you thought when it happened, these ultimately ended up being bad business decisions, and it's hurt the team.
Yeah, and it hurt the team this year because Christian McCaffrey, Trent Williams, older players at their positions. Brandon Ayuk, freak knee injury. Obviously, not a whole. There's nothing you could do about that, but the injuries are there, right? Less of a risk on Brandon Ayuk because he's a young wide receiver coming off his rookie contract. More risk with an aging Trent Williams and, a 28-year-old Christian McCaffrey. So again, bad business for this season in that those 3 got injured and you got almost no production out of either Christian McCaffrey or Brandon Ayuk. But I was looking at Christian McCaffrey's contract. I just pulled it up on SpotTrack. And really what it is it's bad business for the future 49ers as well. And that's where I think the bad business is that you sold out future iterations of this team to try and run it back one more time with an aging core. And that is going to end up hurting you in 2027 and 2028 even more than it hurts you right now. Because right now, there's nothing you can do about an injury taking a player away from you. There is something you can do about how you structure contracts and who you choose to pay and who to give money to, thinking towards the future, because there is Christian McCaffrey's cap hit in 2025 is $9.8 million. Not a big deal. His cap hit this year was 6.6. Even his cap hit in 2026 is not a big deal. It's 9.7. His cap hit in 2027 is $25 million. And then there is a void year in 2028 with a cap hit of $14.8 million. I mean, that is brutal. And obviously they're going to, I mean, again, there are smart people that run this stuff. They'll know how to get, but the accumulation of stuff like that, like if this was a one-off, right? If this was just one player, but it's not, it's Christian McCaffrey. It's Trent Williams. It's Deebo Samuel. It's all these contracts that are cap friendly in the moment and then just hurt like hell in the future because you're chasing a championship with an aging core. And that's where I think we're going to, look back and go, man, that hurts a lot.
And you're continually trying to kick the can down the road with these contracts. And eventually, you have to come to pay with that. So Trent Williams too. And again, with Trent, well, let me ask you this, I guess, before I say this. Do you think coming back next year, do you have any faith that the Niners are going to be able to turn it around with the guys that are on the team this year? So obviously you can have a big draft pick, you can make some signings and they can, okay, this guy made an impact, but the players that they have and the players that you expect to return and the players that you expect to return from injury, do you think they're going to make that big of an impact next year?
I do. I think Trent Williams will still be Trent Williams. I don't think he'll be peak Trent Williams, but I think Trent Williams, when Trent Williams is on the field, I think until the day that he hangs him up, I'm going to have faith that he's going to be a top 5 tackle, top 10 tackle in the league. Christian McCaffrey, yes, because again, the only reason I would say no is because he didn't look great this year, but we also didn't get to see him even have a ramp up, right? Like, the first handful of games that we saw him in would have been preseason, right? Where he's ramping up. So still only 29, one of the better athletes I've ever seen in my life. So there's faith in that. Brandon Ayuk, I can't have any faith that he's ever going to be Brandon Ayuk again. And I only base that on what I've seen from other players like OBJ, right? OBJ is really the one that in my mind, every time I think about the negative outcome of this injury for Brandon Ayuk, it just screams OBJ to me, where it's like, he's just never the same. Right. And, it takes him multiple seasons to even get back to, a baseline of where he could have been, and then got injured again, right? OBJ in this regard. So, but I do still think this team is pretty talented, and I think there are some moves to be made, a shoring up of the interior of the offensive line being the biggest one. So to answer your question, yes, I do have faith. I don't know how much faith I have. I have less faith than I would have prior to this season. This season has really kind of been an eye-opening experience, and I definitely have less belief in this team, including, to a certain extent, Kyle Shanahan. But I still think that there's too much talent on this team to not think that they would be a contender, at least in the NFC.
And with Trent Williams, you're going to need him to be Trent Williams, because he's going to make $22 million for cap hit in 2025. The dead cap is 56.8. Now, there is a potential out in 2026, but even that dead cap is 35 million. So they put themselves in a position with him where they do need him for the next couple of years. And Ayuk, we just don't know, because the injury is so brutal. But he's another person that they committed to and committed big dollars to be your number one wide receiver, and they need him.
Come join me, Andrew Filippone.
And me, Patrick Peterson, 3-time NFL All-Pro cornerback on First and Pod for premier NFL coverage and conversations.
Our motto on the podcast is every team, every week, and we don't play favorites. Every episode, you get a glimpse of the entire National Football League with First and Pod. Follow and listen to First and Pod on Mondays and Fridays on the free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm not as optimistic about the future. And I wasn't that optimistic about this year, because I thought they were getting older, and I thought there was a lot of tread on the tires with 60 games in the last 3 seasons and everything like that. But now I see these guys coming back. They're just going to be old again next year. I don't see. Sure, if you get a whole season on Christian McCaffrey, it's going to be better than what you had this year. Yeah, but it's not going to be 2023 Christian McCaffrey, 2023 Christian McCaffrey. It's probably not. Doesn't mean he's going to be a bad player. He'll still be very good. But I don't expect that Saquon McCaffrey impact that you see what they can do next year.
I agree with you, and I don't think that you need it. But the concern that I have in that regard is not in Christian McCaffrey. It's in Kyle Shanahan recognizing that Christian McCaffrey isn't the same, because the reason that I don't have a worry that he can't be like a Saquon or even like prime Christian McCaffrey is because we know what Jordan Mason can be. We've seen it this year. And we also have seen glimpses of what Isaac Guerrero can be. And so those three, like, that is a great like triumvirate of backs. My concern is less about him and more about Kyle Shanahan and whether like he can manage to, not allow Christian McCaffrey to just be like, no, you can't take me off the field. Like, no, we're going to take you off the field, but you're still like our primary threat. But we've got these other guys that are threats as well. And I think if you can, if you can manage that, then I think you also make Christian McCaffrey a lot better.
Yeah, I just worry that the things we've seen this year too, not only the age, but how many penalties have we seen that have hurt drives?
Yeah.
They've just been an undisciplined, sloppy team all year. Is it just, did someone put a spell on them this year, or is this kind of who they are? That's what worries me. You're going to get a lot of the same people coming back next year. There's a lot of guys in that team that need to look in the mirror. There needs to be a gut check with a lot of them. Somebody that's going to make a big difference. I think they're going to find a way to bring him back. But the question is, at what cost is Dre Greenlaw? Because when Dre Greenlaw is on that field, that's a different defense. Whole team feeds off it. But he couldn't even get through a game this year coming back. So you're not going to give him a 3-year, $60 million contract, right? That's
Right.
probably not going to happen. I have no idea what a contract
Is there
look like with him.
I would say the question is there a team that will? That's what you have to wonder.
And will he be willing to do something with the Niners to stay here and maybe reset his market, even if it's a 1-year deal?
Right.
1 year, $10 million with incentives like crazy, something like that. Would he be willing to do that, reset his market, and then go out and get paid again after a healthy season? To me, that would be the perfect scenario for the Niners.
Ideal, yeah.
Because I think before, when it was kind of like, they may have to move on from Greenlaw. I don't think that's an option. If he's healthy, if they feel he's healthy, he makes an immense difference on this defense.
Yes.
You saw it just when he's been on there. Yep. He has to come back. If not, you have just a huge hole at linebacker next year. Huge hole next to Warner. The other guys they have to me are not cutting it. Defensive
Vonda
line
Campbell will probably be available.
Defensive line again. You have to go into me other than Bosa. You need a lot of pieces, man. You know, there's a lot of things next year that I don't know. The secondary, I do feel good about. I like what we've seen there.
Yeah.
I
would say that I was going to say with the defensive line, the one thing that I've seen towards the end of the season now has been the evolution of Yetur Gross-Matos into that Arden Key, Charles Omenihu role. And that's been, I think, a huge development because they signed him to a 2-year deal. So he'll be back next year. I think that is a massive development for them. And I think that will be huge moving forward. They still need somebody like Robert Beal Jr. is supposed to be this guy, but they still need somebody opposite Bosa like D Ford, right? They still are searching for that D Ford.
Yeah, that's
I don't know that Leonard Floyd is the answer, and he signed a 2-year deal as well, but I think both of those were glorified 1-year deals, but they could bring Gross-Matos back. I don't know that they'll bring Floyd back, but I think it's the interior that really needs the biggest influx of talent, and so it'll be interesting to see what they do there.
And Lenore playing like a top cornerback, getting extended, and then continuing to play like a top cornerback was also huge. Maybe the best thing that happened to them this season.
Yeah.
Coach Yak on Twitter posted Lenore this season, 479 coverage snaps, 0 TDs allowed, 9 pass breakups, 2 picks, 9 forced incompletions, 70.6 rating when targeted, 74.2 PFF coverage grade. He's had a phenomenal year. He's an
That's a Pro Bowl year.
Yeah. Pro Bowl, definitely. Maybe he's been all pro-ish, you know? So he's the type of dude the Niners locked him in. He looks like a number 1 corner. That secondary, Mustafa looks good. Green will be back next year starting. So
Hufunga's the other question. Same question with Greenlaw.
Yeah. Can you bring these guys back on 1-year prove-it deals?
Yeah.
For lack of a better term, what to call it. They can reset their markets. That would be huge for the Niners and really maybe save this defense. Because if not, it's a lot of question marks.
Yeah. You don't see it a lot in the NFL. But it'd be interesting if you took a page out of a guy that I really grew to dislike quite a bit, and that's Farhan Zaidi, the former GM of the San Francisco Giants. But he would take flyers on players, right, that are trying to essentially reestablish their market, but do so with a reasonable long-term deal with like a 1-year an opt-out after the first year. Like I would wonder if they could do some, again, the NFL doesn't really do this, but it'd be interesting to see them start to do something like that, where like you sign a Greenlaw and a Hufunga to like a 3-year whatever deal, right? But after the first year, it's not the top end of the market, right? It's like a mid-level 3-year extension. But if you play lights out, then you can opt out and after that first year and either we can pay you or you can find your money elsewhere. But that would be interesting. But I don't foresee that happening. But yeah, I think both of those guys, if you could convince them to come back on 1-year incentive laden deals to reestablish their market, both for the 49ers and for themselves, I think that would be one of the priorities for this offseason.
And another person who's, to me, has a lot to prove next year, just because this year has been so bad, and bad for him, is Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah.
Kyle Shanahan has had a terrible season. And this was somebody who has coming off of 3 state NFC championships, almost won the Super Bowl. Well, there were issues there. People can call it what they want to. I know people have strong opinions on it. Did almost win the freaking Super Bowl. It went to overtime. He's had a bad season. And you brought up a good point. You were looking at him and McVay, and I know you had some wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, I saw a tweet and I, it kind of caught me off guard. I think it was after did they play on Sunday or Monday? I can't remember. Whenever the Rams played and they won. I saw a tweet, and Sean McVay now has been the head coach for the Los Angeles Rams for the same amount of time that Kyle Shanahan has been the head coach for the San Francisco 49ers. Sean McVay has one losing season in his time in LA. Kyle Shanahan now has 4 losing seasons in San Francisco. And with one more loss, those 4 losing seasons all would be double-digit loss seasons. Sean McVay has 1 losing season with double-digit losses. It certainly feels like Sean McVay is on a different level now than Kyle Shanahan, when for a long time it kind of felt like they were peers. Obviously, McVay has a Super Bowl victory and Kyle Shanahan doesn't. And, it doesn't really do a whole lot of good to try and compare these two coaches, because it's like, what's the point, right? But what it got me thinking about was, for the majority of his tenure here, at least starting in 2019, when he finally got some players to actually implement the offensive system that he wanted, they got a defense, right? And they started winning games. From that point until, I would say, this season, every time I tuned into a 49ers game, I always felt like, well, I know that my team has a coaching advantage. I know that my team has a play caller advantage because my team has Kyle Shanahan calling plays. When D'Amico's second year, I felt like we've got 2 play callers that, we have a distinct advantage, because I felt like D'Amico was, elite in that regard as a defensive play caller. I don't know that I don't feel that way anymore. And I'm wondering now, could Kyle Shanahan be still considered a top 5 play caller in the NFL? And if he can't, what does that imply or mean for this team moving forward? Because I don't know that he could be considered anymore a top 5 play caller in the NFL. What do you think?
Well, it depends on if you see this season as kind of a throwaway or not. I don't know how that's judged, and I don't know if we can judge it until we see what happens next year, because this season has not been good. And not just
but my question would be, how could you possibly consider this season a throwaway? Because the quarterback has been there the whole time. Like, I feel like an offensive season can only be considered a throwaway if the quarterback goes down, right? But the quarterback hasn't gone down. He's missed 1 game. That's it. So that's where I'm like, I don't know if you can, even with Christian McCaffrey and how incredible his 2023 was, offensive player of the year, to be without him obviously hurts, but it's not the same. It's not the same as not being with your quarterback.
And what worries me, or what concerns me the most, is, again, the sloppiness, the penalties, the special teams, what's happened with the defensive coordinator the past couple of years, the way that contracts have been handled. There's things that are starting to worry me. What drives me crazy about when people do talk about Kyle and they're like, oh, well, Kyle called some good plays today. He's the head coach. He's not the offense, just the offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
He is the head coach. He is the CEO. He is in charge of all of it. If you're judging him off the plays he called, you are not looking at this correctly at all. He is responsible for all of it. Now, looking at what he's done in the past, just looking at his offenses, he's been a coach in the league for 17 years, an OC or a head coach. He's had 11 times where his offenses have finished in the top 10 in yards. Okay. Points, top 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And so the rest of the times he's been 13th or less, and he's been 20 or lower in points 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times in his career.
More times than he's been top 10.
Yeah. So with the Niners, I'm just on Pro Football Reference here. Let's see. So points with the Niners, and now obviously they were rebuilding. There is context there, right? You have to have the context that they were rebuilding. But 2017, sorry, I'm just getting the points here. 20th, 21st, second in 2019, 21st, 13th, 6th in 2022, 3rd in 2023, and they're 15th this season in points. So if you're judging him,
genuinely surprised they're 15th in points this year. That is a surprise to me.
And I guess with Kyle, I guess the question is, I don't have the answer. I guess we're talking to the listeners here. I'm asking the listeners.
Right.
Do you think he's the kind of coach who can get more with less? When he has a good team, when they're scoring points early and they're ahead, right? They're winning games, they're blowing people up. But is he the kind of coach? And again, I'm not trying to answer this question. I'm asking you're as the listener, you decide this for yourself. Is he the kind of coach that is going to get more with less? When he does have injuries, when he's got things going on, when things aren't going right, is he going to be able to find ways to pull out victories? Mike Tomlin, your team kind of sucks, but you still are 9-8, or you still won 10 games. Is he that kind of coach? Is he the type of coach who's going to find ways to score points when he doesn't have his best players? Is he the kind of coach who's going to get guys in other areas to play better? Is he the kind of coach when you're having a down season, you're still going to find a way to not lose 10 games? Because he's 8 years, 4 of them now, assuming they lose one of the next 2, and I think that they will. 8 years, 4 of those 8 years, you're going to have 10 losses or more. Now, Al.
Yeah.
Well, he took over a rebuilding team. Yes. 2017. Are you kidding me? What are you going to do? 2018, they had Garoppolo, and everybody was like, oh, maybe this team is going to be okay this year. Right?
Yeah.
Jimmy got hurt. Even before Jimmy got hurt, they looked like shit.
They did.
They should have lost game 2 to Detroit. Garoppolo threw a pick 6 that got called back for, I believe it was a holding on Detroit, defensive holding. They were going to annihilate it against Kansas City, and then Jimmy gets hurt. But the rest of that season, they went 4-12. They didn't, okay, we got our quarterbacks hurt, but we were scrappy for 6 or 7 wins. No, they weren't. Again, I'm not saying anything here. I'm just telling you what it is. You make your own decisions.
Well, now, I feel like that's, when I brought up Sean McVay, because again, they were really considered kind of, coaching peers in that regard. And obviously, McVay kind of got his start under Shanahan, but they got head coaching positions the same season. And I would argue that McVay has shown a much, much, much better ability at doing more with less than Kyle Shanahan has at all. And because, you look at these 49ers and Rams teams, and there are very few years where you could point to the Rams having a more talented team than the 49ers. Even last year. And I think this does speak to a couple things. One, it speaks to the importance of the quarterback position, right? Because Sean McVay has had Matthew Stafford for 4 seasons now. And arguably future Hall of Fame level quarterback, whether he makes the Hall of Fame or not, I'll never, we have no idea, but
he's a borderline guy.
It can wallpaper over quite a few things, right? Having an elite quarterback is going to keep you pretty, I think at the very least, like at 500. And then as long as you don't lose them, 500 is like your floor, right? But again, this team has had Brock Purdy all season except for 1 game. So that's where it's hard to fathom that this team is going to lose as many games as it did. And a lot of the mistakes that you talked about fall in the lap of the head coach.
And McVay took over a loaded team. They took over 2 completely different situations. Sure. McVay has coached, this is his 8th year. He has 5, he may end up with 6 10-win seasons. So they win another game, and we'll assume 1-1, right? There's no reason he can't. 6 10-win seasons in 8 years. 9-7 and 5-12 in the other 2 years. 5-12 was the only losing season there. I would argue that he did get more with less the last 2 years.
100%.
We thought the Rams were going to be a lot of people did in 2023.
Not even a question.
Not going to be a good team. 10-7, they make the playoffs. This year with tons of injuries, people counted them out. We did. They're done. They're going to probably win 10 games again and win the division again. So he definitely got more with less this year. Now, we went over Kyle's offense. Let's go over McVay's, how he's did. He's been a head coach or an OC 11 years. He's had a top 10 offense 6 times in the 11 years. yards wise. Points, 1, 2, 3, 5 times in 11 years he's been a top 10 offense in points. So he's had some down years too in points. 22nd in 2020, 26th in 2014 with Washington, 27th in 2022. But again, those wins and losses, it makes a difference there. I'm looking at his record now. It is pretty impressive when he had the loaded teams.
Well, and think about
5, 13-3, 9-7, 10-6, 12-5.
What year did you say he was 27th in points?
I believe it was 2022. So it was that.
And what did they do then?
It was a year after they won the Super Bowl, and Stafford didn't play that. Stafford was hurt right there.
Yeah.
I'm looking at that season right now too. So yeah, I mean, that stuff happens, and you're gonna have years like that.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's just person listening. Do you think Kyle's just having one of those years? Is there an excuse for you? Kyle Shanahan is tied with Dick Nolan, not Mike Nolan. Dick Nolan for the most losing seasons in 49ers history right now with 4. And he's done that in just 8 years. So 4 years, 4 really good seasons, 4 really bad. When you look at Kyle's 4 bad seasons, 2017 was a rebuilding year. 2018 was a Garoppolo injury. Mm-hmm. 2020 was a year after the Super Bowl with all the injuries. And again, you had quarterback injuries and Bosa was out and COVID. It's a crazy year. And this year, which there's been injuries, but there's been bigger issues. There's bigger issues there. You as a fan, Brian and I are not answering this for you. We're putting this out there in the ether for people to discuss and talk with your friends and whatever you want to do. Do you look at those years in the context of those years and say there were things out of his control and you just chalk it up to whatever? Or are those things about those years that start to worry you? Again, I'm just throwing this out there.
Mm-hmm.
If Kyle has everything going and he's ahead, we know his record late in games and we know his record coming back and everything like that. It's not good. He's got everything going for him. He can roll people. We've seen it. But when it's not going for him, can he get more with less? You the listener, answer that question. To me this year, I would have said yes, and he was trending in the right direction and everything's. I don't want to hear any Kyle slander, but this year has really scared me with him because they don't look like they want to be there. They look disinterested. They're just making mistakes that you shouldn't be making it in preseason and practice over and over again. And people wanted to blame Purdy for this last loss for the interception. And I don't know if that hit that he got affected the throw or not. Maybe it did. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it was just a shitty throw.
It did. It did. But
regardless, how many plays where they had the ball on the 2 and there was a penalty that brought it back to the 12 where they would have won the game easily, but you kept shooting yourself in the foot. You get pushed back. You miss a field goal. You got to settle for a field goal. And that's been the story of the year. And at some point, it has to fall on the head coach. Not if you have a bad stretch, can you fix it? But it's happened over and over and over and over and over again. And these contract situations happen over and over and over and over and over again. It's not the buck stops with Kyle. So at some point, he's got to adjust, or next year just show, you know what? Last year was last year. I didn't do well. He'll never say that, but I didn't do well. But this year, I'm going to show you, and we're going to be back.
I would say this. This is the first of the 4 losing seasons where I have come away with questions about Kyle Shanahan. The other 3 I didn't, because again, rebuilding, lose your quarterback on a team that is still rebuilding, right? Like it's not like they were, they might have made the playoffs, whatever, but 2018. So, you lose your quarterback. You just have no shot. And then 2020, all the injuries to Garoppolo, injuries to Bosa, right? Like you lost cornerstone players early in the season. I will chalk that up to, you still should. And like you said, they were still competitive in all the games that they were in. Right. And they were some Nick Mullins interceptions away from possibly eking out even a winning, a winning record. So again, this is the first season where I'm like, ooh, this feels different. This feels different in regards to Kyle Shanahan. And to me, and again, I'm just, Joe Blow with the microphone. Obviously I'm not, I don't pretend to have all the answers. I don't take myself too seriously, but I've done my fair share of coaching. Again, youth sports, it is what it is, but I've also played my fair share of sports and had coaches that lost a team. And what you see on those teams is a lot of what we see right now, which is sloppy penalties, sloppy play on special teams. To me, that is a symptom of possibly Shanahan starting to get tuned out by his players, right? And there is a reality in coaching that sometimes your stay just ends because you have, your time there has gotten stale, your message has gotten stale, whatever. There are definitely coaches who have overcome that from one season to the next and hit the ground running again. I'm not saying that Kyle Shanahan can't do that, but if we see a lot of what we see this season, especially on offense with sloppy penalties and things like that, to me, 2 seasons in a row tells me that it might be time to move on. I don't think that we're there yet. I think that Kyle Shanahan is a talented coach. I think that he is I think his football IQ is off the charts. And I think that this season might put a chip on his shoulder that could propel him to even better greatness.
I hope
so. No idea if that's going to be the case or not. But like I said, if you see the same issues next season, that's when you say, all right, it might be time to move on. Now, when you say that as a fan, as an analyst, whatever, the immediate response from the diehards is, well, who's the better option? Who are you going to? That's you're looking at the problem exactly the wrong way. Nobody is saying they need to get rid of Kyle Shanahan because they need to go get Ben. No one is saying that. What we're saying is sometimes coaches have to move on, and we're not there yet. But this season is the first time where I thought we might be entering that. And that is scary to me. But like I said, Kyle Shanahan could come back next season with a fire lit under his ass, and they could just, have a season similar to 2023 or 2019 where they just come out and start steamrolling guys, because they're going to have more than likely a third or fourth place schedule. So that will be helpful. And we may be talking about this team in the Super Bowl again. You don't know, but you have to admit that this season has created far more questions than answers for the 49ers franchise.
And some of the things that made him Teflon have changed around. And what I mean by that is, you mentioned 2020. Yeah, they had all the Mullins interceptions that killed them. But one of the reasons they were in a lot of those games is because of Robert Saleh's defense. You say, well, Kyle's not calling the defense. No, but he hired Robert Saleh. Right. He's the CEO. He put somebody in position there that helps the team. If Kyle's offense is struggling, but he's got a lights out specialist team and his lights out defense, he's the head coach. I'm okay with that because it's the whole team. It's all 3 phases. Then you hire DeMeco Ryans. You when you look at the personnel end of it, you have all these issues with contracts, but Bosa got in there and Debo got in there, and we got Kittle and Warner resigned. So all these things were okay and they were winning. But now this year, all the contracts blew up in their face, all 3 of them. Because they waited too long, because they maybe gave money to some aging guys, because they maybe let Ayuk dictate too many things to them. Well, now it blew up in your face and it hasn't. So now that's an issue. Now your coaching hires. You don't have Saleh and DeMeco. You've had Steve Wilkes, who you scapegoated, despite how anybody feels about him. He was the scapegoat. And you brought in Nick Sorensen and Brandon Staley, and that hasn't worked out. So now what? That's not Teflon anymore either. So as these things keep adding up, and now you don't win, and now you're going to have a 10-loss season. Like you said, well, now the door is open to maybe this is getting to the end of the line. Maybe all his luck is kind of run out. You can't keep whiffing on these things and it not come back to bite you. The quarterback. Yeah. If Purdy isn't the answer, we're on another quarterback. What is that? Your 4th franchise quarterback in 9 years? If he's not the answer? What? There's those sort of things that, we can't keep doing this every 2 years and rotating quarterbacks and thinking like, oh, this is a recipe for winning. Eventually it's not going to be. You had the run. 2019 was kind of we were ahead of the game. Holy shit. Where did this come from? Then 2020 happened and we're like, where are we? But then you had the 3-year run. Now that's over. So can you rebuild this? Can you get your quarterback long-term? Can you get your coaches? Can you rebuild this? Can you sign guys to good contracts? Can you get another core together? We're going to find out, but like you said, it can go either way. He can be the coach here for the next 5 or 6 years, and next year's another winning playoff season. Or this time next year, we're like, all right, maybe there needs to be a change here. We're at the crossroads now where it can go either way, and that's crazy.
Yes. Yeah. Never would have expected that.
Nope.
Never would have expected it.
I would have never expected it that I would have gotten through the show. You're obviously not watching because we're not on YouTube anymore, but like I would talk and then just mute my microphone and cough for the whole time Brian talked.
You did great.
But I got through it, man.
Killed it.
So we did it. I'm a pro. I've been doing this long.
That's right. That's right.
All right, everybody. We'll probably see you Tuesday. Probably Tuesday would probably be our next show. We'll record our next show. But until then, that's before New Year's, right? I don't even know what day it is.
That'll be New Year's Eve.
Yeah. So hopefully the Niners don't get their asses kicked too much by the Lions. Hopefully Brian and I win our championships. You're certainly going to hear about it.
We'll hear about it
on Tuesday, either way. And until then, thanks for listening, everybody.
Later.
Niners on 3. 1, 2, 3.
.2400 Sports is an Odyssey company.